I want to talk a little bit about the recent report released by the National ACLU that really does a great job of and is really an exhaustive look at trends in marijuana arrests around the country in every state and every county in America. And what the report shows, and I think is especially significant for Maryland, is that Maryland is now 4th in the country in our arrest rate for marijuana possession. And we are, that's an increase. We were 8th in 2001, but over the last 10 years we've actually jumped. Our marijuana possession increased by a whopping 34% between 2001 and 2010. And just to give you a little sense of context, during that same period our population increased by only about 7%. We also have the distinction of being 3rd in the country in our per capita expenditures on marijuana enforcement. We're 7th in the nation in terms of the number of raw arrests, and I think that that's, so we're outnumbering arrests in even states with significantly larger populations than ours. Now, with respect to Montgomery and Prince George's counties in particular, I want to give, the national report doesn't yet break out provide a lot of detail about localities, but just so you know, the ACLU of Maryland is preparing and will soon release a report that analyzes the disparities, the arrest rates in Maryland in every county. Let me step back for a second. So the national data shows, first of all, this dramatic spike in arrests across the country. Second of all, it shows really dramatic race disparities in arrests. In Maryland, African Americans are 3 times as likely as their white counterparts to be arrested to be arrested for marijuana possession. One thing that's important to note about the numbers that I'm giving you is that FBI, these are all based on FBI data that doesn't actually break out arrests for Latinos. So Latino arrests are frequently lumped together with white arrests. So it is very likely that, especially in jurisdictions like Montgomery County and Prince George's County, where there's a very significant Latino population, that the numbers are actually undercounting the disparities. In Montgomery County, arrests increased by 26% between 2001 and 2010. African Americans are less than 1/5 of the population, but nearly half of all arrests in Montgomery County. The arrest rate for whites in Montgomery County is 1.45 arrests per 1,000 people. For African Americans, is 4.6 per 1,000 people. And I think it's also important to just know quickly that one of the things that I assume is taken for granted in a room like this, but I maybe shouldn't, is that there is an extraordinary, overwhelming evidence that rates of use are comparable across race. And so it's very consistent. There's and in some contexts, there actually, depending on the age group, there's actually evidence that that sometimes whites use at higher rates than African Americans. So the notion that these disparities are due to differing rates of use really doesn't hold any water. In Prince George's County has the distinction of being tied with Charles County for being 1st in the state in the increase in marijuana arrests between 2001 and 2010. Arrests for marijuana possession in Prince George's County doubled between 2001 and 2010. 100% increase. That's 1,100 arrests increase. Meanwhile, the population increased by about 6% in Prince George's County. And one of the things that comes up when we talk about majority black jurisdictions sometimes is people say, oh, well, the disparities aren't as bad because we're a majority black jurisdiction. And I think, in fact, a spokesperson for the Prince George's Police Department made that very point in a recent article. But I'm here to tell you that they're totally wrong. The arrest rate for whites in Prince George's is 1.5 per 1,000, and for African Americans it's 3.6 per 1,000. So it's 3.6. So African Americans make up about 66% of Prince George's population, but 85% of arrests. In Baltimore City, or other majority black jurisdiction, I can tell you that among youth, young people arrested, 98% of our arrests are African American for marijuana possession. Out of 435 arrests, 9 were white, which I think is just shocking. And I'm happy to talk more. I think the other sort of main point to make is just the extraordinary amount of the human cost in terms of of what we're doing in our approach to policing and enforcing marijuana. So I think that we often talk about the numbers of arrests. One of the things that these numbers don't give you and what we can't give you are the number of police, the citizen encounters, right? All of the interactions with police that don't involve, where somebody might be stopped and or searched, but there's no arrest. And what we certainly know anecdotally and just from common sense that for every arrest, there are many, many more people who are stopped and searched. And just to give you a sense of context there, many of you are familiar with the ACLU of Maryland's driving while black case again, involving Maryland State Police racial profiling of African American motorists under the guise of drug enforcement. And we have, because of our litigation, we have a database of the searches conducted and the justifications provided by police between 1995 and 2008. And when we did a search for the number of times officers justified the search by saying that they detected the odor of marijuana, and it was about a third of all the searches. It was a very significant portion. But what was even more remarkable was that 70% of the time that officers said that they smelled marijuana, they found no drugs. Equally, if not more remarkable, is they were better at smelling marijuana in white people's cars than they were in African Americans or Latinos' cars. They found drugs at higher rates in the cars of whites. It was about 37% of the time that they said that they smelled marijuana, they found it in white people's cars. 24% of the time for African Americans, and 9% of the time for Latinos. Which is just absurd. Serena's right to laugh. It's absurd. But I think the point I want to make is that those are all really significant. You know, I think one of the things that's been striking for me about working on this is that we're talking about arrest, but we also need to talk about the way we're policing communities differently in applying these laws. We're enforcing the law differently in different places, and I'm sure we'll get to talk more about that.